Back to basics. I'm sure there's going to be one or two of you that'll be happy about that. So what are we doing? We are doing general maintenance on Ugly Alice, getting ready to take it over to family members, let them use it to trim up their lawn. So I'm going through and taking care of everything, and I thought this is a good opportunity to break out the camera and chat a little bit about what you want to do at least once a year, depending on the size of your property. So I'm just going to go through what I've already done. Very simple and self-explanatory. A, check your air filter. If you cannot see daylight through the air filter, if you point it towards the sun, if you can't see the sun, it's time to replace your air filter. I just blew off the carburetor really good. Make sure that everything is snugged up. Your intake manifold bolts both on the block and to the carburetor, that your linkages are all working as they should, that your governor's doing what it should. Just make sure everything's moving and acting the way that it should. Cables, your throttle cables, you want to grease up, oil up, whatever you need to do to your cables. Keep them happy and healthy. Every single pivot point that you've got, you want to lubricate. So your drag link or your center link, you want a little bit of oil on either side. You want to grease your spindles. Got your grease zerk right there. It's a good idea to jack up your tractor before putting grease in it, so that you're forcing grease down at the business end where all the weight is carried. You have a center pivot point on the axle as well, right here. Give a little oil behind it, little oil there. There's a spacer in there so it keeps the axle, gives it the ability to float, so make sure you've got that. Each of your ball joints here and there on your drag link, make sure that they're lubricated. If you have the two-piece gears, you have grease zerks on both the pinion gear and the main gear up underneath. You'll see the grease zerks. Grease them up. Also, take your steering and make sure that you don't have a lot of play. And also make sure that this is moving in conjunction without any pause. If there's pause, there are two 5/32 Allen head set screws that may need replaced. This is a common point of contention with these. They get loosened up. Same thing with your, what do you want to call that? Your idler arm, I guess. Same thing with this. You've got two 1/4 inch set screws. You can replace those and put Allen head screws in, but make sure they are set screws. I've covered set screws before, and I'm going to touch on them again here just real quick so that you can see what a good set screw looks like and what a bad set screw looks like. So let me get a nice big one here. New on a big one. Give me a big one so it's easier to see. Okay, let's get under some decent light here. All right, here is just one of the square head set screws, but if you look at the end of that, see how it's all mushroomed and flattened out? That should be a sharp cutting edge. You want to make sure it's a good sharp cutting edge, just like you see there. You can actually take these on the grinder and grind them to get the edge back, but in the case of this one, it's so severe, you want to be sure that you take a center drill or something to that effect and drill the center of that out just a little bit. Just give it a little concave and then go through and grind it. But they are salvageable, so that takes care of that. And there are a number of them on the tractor. They are just, they're all over. So if you see them, check them. Set screws are holding everything together. Your lift arm, just lube your pivot point here, and your mower deck engagement or your PTO engagement lever, just lubricate. A little bit of oil here and there, a little bit of oil on your rod, a little bit of oil on the spring, but try to stay away from your belts. All right, we don't want to oil our belts, that'll cause them to slip. Now, I talked about these two grease zerks on the front axle. You also have a grease zerk here for your mid PTO. You can sort of kind of see it. Let me shed some light on the subject. I know there's a flashlight around here somewhere. Where'd I put you? Where did you go? There you are. Okay. Let's get back over here. Okay, now you can see it. Got a grease zerk there. You have grease zerk there, grease zerk on the other side, 2 grease zerks under here if you have the 2 gear, 1 grease zerk if you have the other one. If you have a lot of play, those have an eccentric that can be adjusted. If you don't have the manual for yours, we're talking about 1958 through 1970 tractors with the valley frame. The frames that get flipped over, it's a completely different maintenance. Okay, all your pivot points. We're pivot here for your brake, lube here, and on the inside on the later models like the 69s and 70s, there's actually a grease zerk for you. Your rock shaft that goes straight through operates your lift rod for your rear PTO. Anything that pivots, lubricate it, anything. Your shift rod down up underneath is a little sleeve, it's about that long, a little sleeve that this slides through. So if this is really hard to move back and forth, you lube that up underneath there and you're going to be in good shape. And you can do that with an oil can that has just a rubber hose attached to it so you can get up under there. If you look up under this way, you may or may not be able to see it. Let's see if we can get a view of it. The camera's going to be sideways, so we can't get the camera low enough to see it, but trust me, it's under there. Okay, lube your pivot points on your throttle and choke. Give the engine just a half decent cleaning. Of course, you want to change your oil. I use marine grade grease because you never know. I mean, you can see the red grease that's poking out right there, and you can also see how dirty Ugly Alice is. That's because I'm constantly doing this lubrication. You want to lube your clutch rod and engagement rod and all pivot points associated with it, which includes the bar that comes over to engage your brake. Be careful you don't get oil on your brake, but you know, a little drop of oil there drops on all of your pivot points. If you have the rear PTO, all your pivot points get lubricated. High-low, you have a pivot point on this side and a pivot point on that side where your engagement is. And also put just a little bit of white lithium grease on the rim if you have the high-low so that it slides through your guides. If you have OEM guides, they have a rubberish, nylonish insert in them, and they typically last quite a good long while. Now I'm getting ready to add gear oil to the rear differential, and you're going to want to take out the top plug. That would be the plug that you use if you get between gears and use your bent screwdriver to pull or push to get your forks back in line. So take that out so you have a good vent, and then you'll come back. And on mine, I have added a 90 degree on here just to make it easier for me to put oil in. But I just want to see oil at the base, and it's kind of hard to see, but I want to see oil just at the base, and that's where it's at. So, okay, then you have another grease zerk on your axle tube, and you want to grease that. And like I said, you can see how dirty Ugly Alice is. Well, there you can see the grease zerk right there at the bottom. They're going to be greasy and dirty if they're well cared for. I don't care how clean Ugly Alice is. I just want Ugly Alice to perform in the best manner that she can. So that covers, oh, also your bevel gearbox. You want to check for lateral in and out play and side to side play, or rotational play, and you don't want too much. What's too much? Too much is you dump the clutch and the tractor doesn't go anywhere. I've had bevel gearboxes that have a considerable amount of play that I have attempted to destroy just by beating the tar out of them with no luck. Wasn't able to destroy them. Okay, your seat hinge pivot points if you're lifting your seat up a lot, which you really shouldn't have to. Like I say, just all of your pivot points. You also want to check the condition of your idler pulley here to make sure that it is okay. Check the condition of your belts. Make sure you don't have extreme cracking on them. You want to check your tire pressures regularly. When changing the oil, once every couple years, I will actually flush the crankcase with a little bit of mineral spirits because I use 30-weight non-detergent oil. Non-detergent oil is imperative to an engine with no oil filter. SAE30 non-detergent, okay? And I use this particular one formulated for diesels because it has zinc in it. And these engines like the zinc. You know, we're doing lead-free gas now. I also use a lead substitute in the fuel, which is right here. You can't see that. That label's all but gone here, but you can get a lead substitute to keep the rings conditioned and all of your guides and bushings and all that fun happy stuff in there. What else do we have to do maintenance on? I don't want to forget anything, so that I'm giving you guys what you need to get the job done right. Think, Zippo. Are you forgetting anything? I think I have pretty well covered everything that you need to do, except for topping off the bevel gearbox level. And same thing, I've put an extended reach on the 45-degree street elbow. See the street, that's the original street elbow. I just put this addition on here just to make it easier for me. But you want to add oil until it's at the bottom, until you can see oil resting at the bottom of the street elbow. And then you also want to check either side for excessive leaking. Check inside, look at your yoke, see if you have any leaking there. And then one more thing that you can do to make sure that you don't have any issues with your seals and bearings is to rotate your bevel gearbox manually by hand just a little bit and watch the yoke and make sure that the yoke is that there's no lag in the yoke. Just like I was talking about the lag in the steering, you want to make sure that the yoke moves in unison with the cross shaft. So we're going to do that right now, and I'm going to hold the flashlight in my mouth, so hang on. And I have no odd play. So there you have it. That is what you do to do your maintenance on these machines at least once a year. And it doesn't have to be pretty, but just make sure that, you know, you slather it with oil and grease it where it needs greased. Other pivot points would be on your deck if you're doing a lot of adjusting between fields or different lawns. Also all of your pivot points up here, your pivot points on your bail, all the pivot points or contact points, anywhere where there is moving mass, you want to be sure to lubricate really, really well. And I had a question about where this tension spring that goes to the mid PTO attaches. So there's a little tab. Let me get on the other side. There's a little tab on the mid PTO itself. When we look down there, you can see that tab. The first part of the spring goes into that tab, and that tab is connected to your PTO engagement. And then on the back, on one of the case bolts, let me blow that off real quick so it's a little easier to see. Give me just a second here. So this is kind of a twofer to help somebody out. Alright, there we go. We got her blown off. Now let's take a look. Hey, we look down here, we can see, whoop, we can see that tab. We can see how that spring is attached to it. Alright, if you do not have that exact tab, don't sweat it. Just take a piece of 1/8 inch or 3/16 steel, cut it out, drill a hole in it, and use it to mount your spring. Now on the later models, there is a tension release lever that comes across the axle tube here, and there's a lever in the back. You can kind of see the back of the rear implement lift, or the rear implement support right there. Well, it would be right beside it, and it's a lever that would just move down like this, so that it makes it easier to remove your mower deck and remove your deck belt. So kind of a twofer, but mainly, how do you do the maintenance on these guys? If you really want to get into it, you can pull one of your side covers and get in there and oil your gears from the top to make sure everything's lubed up real well there. So there you go. You also want to check the condition of your battery, make sure that you don't have a lot of battery acid leaking out of the battery that could potentially get into your gas tank, on the side of your gas tank, and rust out the side of your gas tank. I always take a piece of fiberglass like that there. It's a shower enclosure. I take a piece of that and cut it out and put it between the battery and the gas tank, just to give it a level of protection. Then if you see that you do have battery acid, get a battery acid neutralizer right there, acid detector and cleaner. That will neutralize the acid. And if you don't have that, you can use baking soda. Just mix up a little bit of baking soda with some water, put it on your terminals. That'll neutralize the acid and help prolong your gas tank life. Alright, that's it. Friendly Neighborhood Zippo. We're into it about 16.5 minutes. If you like this old time, new update and how-to maintenance, there you've got it. One more thing you also do want to, when you jack the front of the tractor up, check and make sure that your wheel bearings, that there's not a lot of play. And it's also a good idea to pop the wheels off and repack your bearings with grease. They're just like automotive roller bearings, tapered roller bearings with races. That's it. Catch you guys on the next one.